I'm writing to you because you really seem to care about kids on drugs. Every day at school, this bully kept coming up to me and calling me a nerd because I wouldn't do drugs, and all the other kids were laughing at me. So I said, okay, and I did some. I don't know what I took or what happened next, but I had an awful accident. The doctor says I'll be fine in a little while, but my mom and dad are really scared, and I am too. I wish I'd never done it. Drugs. The only way to stop abusing them is to stop using them.
Drug use and abuse has remained prevalent in societies throughout history, and people have had various hypotheses to how this issue can be remedied. This issue has escalated to the point at which abuse and addiction have risen to one of the top causes of death in our country. In 2018 alone, over 67,000 people died due to overdose, which has steadily risen in the recent decade. In addition to the hardships of death due to addiction, tens of billions of dollars are spent combating issues surrounding the drug crisis each year. So this is Trevor Henshaw, who is a former addict and ex-convict who is now 3 years clean and has a full-time job. So to start off, how did you end up in jail in the first place?
Yeah, so it's a pretty long story. Just kind of a series of mishaps when I was growing up. Didn't really have a good home. My family had some issues, and kind of early on as a teenager, started turning to drugs. Got caught up with the wrong crowd and things like that. And one thing led to another. I ended up getting hooked on some serious stuff. Got hooked on heroin at one point. And I was about 19 years old the first time I got arrested for possession, and didn't have to go to jail at that point. Was only did some community service. A couple years later, got caught again. This time I had to spend 90 days in jail. Thought that would change things. Got back out and kind of fell down the same path again, and ended up right after my 21st birthday, going right back into jail for possession again, and this time spent about 2 years there. And this last time was pretty much when, I took it upon myself and actually made some changes in my life when I got out. And 3 years clean, and yeah, good.
All right. So you don't really look like the prototypical drug addict or a convict. So was this strange for you or hard while you were serving time?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've heard that a couple different times, and it's unfortunate. But when I was there, there's a lot of very scary, intimidating people that are in prison too. So it was tough. I had to kind of just, there was nothing I could do about it, so I just kind of had to bite the bullet, toughen up a little bit, and go through it. There were quite a lot of people in there that were kind of in similar positions as I was. I was kind of surprised is that when I served my 2-year sentence, that's when I kind of met more people that were, I could relate to, that were there, and kind of started to build a group with them. But I think a lot of people would be surprised how many young people like kids essentially are in jail, just because they got caught up with the wrong things, and just didn't really have anywhere else to turn to. And, it's unfortunate.
Like we can see from Trevor's experiences, many people who end up in the system due to drugs are not the typical targets that the war on drugs had originally intended. Additionally, our nation is seeing a rapid increase in incarcerations for drugs in the middle class, as well as a steep increase in overdoses and deaths within the middle class. How do you think the system failed you?
It's a good question. It's a big question. In short, I would say that it failed me probably by not helping me, when I really needed it. I was just a kid. I was young. I didn't really know any better. And I turned to the wrong things, and, I just got caught up. And, instead of people trying to help me, every time I got in trouble, it was just like, wipe it away, community service, throw a young guy in jail where he's going to be surrounded with other bad influences and things like that. So, from my experience, pretty much like there was no rehabilitation, education opportunities when I was there, and it just kind of left me in the same place that I started. Like I said, every time I got out, ended up going back. And, it wasn't really until this very last time when I took it upon myself to, realize that I needed to turn my life around. And I was able to, fortunately, now I'm working a steady job and, like I said, I've been clean, and unfortunately there's a lot of people that, get stuck in that same cycle and they can't get out.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Trevor, and good luck on the rest of your journey.
No problem. Thank you.
Dan Werb from the International Journal of Drug Policy outlines the issues with current drug policy by saying, recognizing this tension between the goal of the war on drugs to prevent all drug use and a harm reduction-based focus on reducing drug-related harms is essential to ensuring that prevention approaches are effective and appropriate. I'm here with Tasha Long, who works for the Community Social Services of Wayne County, and she's going to share some of her experience from the field. So what experience do you have with the war on drugs?
So in working at CSSWC, I encounter a wide array of people who have been in and out of the prison system and have battled with addiction. Ultimately, I feel like a lot of the people I work with are actually products of negative outcomes of the war on drugs that our country is fighting against.
Where do you now see changes in the system or improvement toward the war on drugs?
I actually think that places like the state of Oregon are doing tremendously progressive and beneficial things towards combating drug addiction. And people now are starting to recognize that putting others in jail for drug use is actually counterproductive to solving this problem, and that there are other options that provide much better solutions. As people's views on this topic continue to change, I think that more places will start to adopt some of these forward-thinking initiatives for their own communities.
When discussing the changing views on the drug epidemic, Christine Minhee from the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy noted, even with a lot of money going into the system, though it takes time for changing political tides to translate into new infrastructure, which is to say nothing of the varying political willingness across the states to adopt the most progressive, most effective drug reform policies, most of which hail from abroad, where the international community does treat drug addiction in notably different ways. What do you think will be the most beneficial when combating drug use and addiction?
I think education, and education is by far the most important tool for combating addiction. And that means really making sure that people are properly educated in the effects and the dangers of drugs, and that will help reduce the harm caused by drugs and ultimately reduce the deaths from drug use. So this is something a lot of places like the Netherlands and Germany have utilized extremely well. These countries have essentially determined that you can't stop people from taking drugs, but educating them on the proper safety information is an effective measure to prevent drug abuse and death.
Lastly, do you see this problem getting better or worse in America?
So my work in the field has been growing exponentially in the last few years, and we see the problem getting worse in our region and in the United States as a whole. And what we're noticing is a severe uptick in overdoses from the middle class, which signals to me that drug addiction, primarily opioid addiction, is on the rise and reaching a wider population.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Tasha, and your work in the field and towards this issue. Thank you.
Of course. And it's projects like this that will really take big steps in harm reduction and combating drug abuse in the United States.